Rather than, have one side or that side talk about it, why not actually invite a city manager here and ask them to sell? So we'll just start off. So this is Matt Horn from Geneva, New York. I should also note that we are live streaming on the internet. I can see right now there's looks like 3,000 people watching online, give or take. Maybe my mom and her friends. Yes, we're up against Monday Night Football. Matt, how long have you been the city manager in Geneva, New York?
So I was hired in Geneva in 2008, so I'm finishing up my 10th year. Prior to Geneva, I was in a city outside of Atlanta called Sandy Springs, Georgia. Another city manager city. Sandy Springs was about 125,000 compared to Geneva's 13,000. I've also worked in South Carolina, in Beaufort, which is the county seat where Hilton Head is located, and then in Stanton, Virginia, which is the home, the birthplace of the city manager form of government.
Oh, maybe use the microphone.
Yeah, sure.
So, I was wondering if you could just sort of tell me a little bit about your training and about how you became a sort of city manager. What kind of courses and experiences you had before coming to Geneva?
Sure. Is this any better? Can everybody hear me? Good, great. Well, I started my career, actually I went to James Madison University, which is in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, west of Richmond. My degree is a bachelor's degree in public administration. I also have taken coursework toward a master's of business administration. Public administration really is kind of a neat mix of traditional government and business. So I spent about 50% of my time in the government wing of the school and another 50% in the business school, learning about budgeting, finance, HR, and those types of things. After I left James Madison, after I graduated, I went to work as an economic development specialist for the city of Stanton, doing business recruitment. Stanton is about 20,000 people, and I was doing both industrial and commercial development for the city, working to build out their industrial park and focused on downtown revitalization. From Stanton, I went to Beaufort, South Carolina, and served as their assistant city manager. And I was in Beaufort for about 4 years. Beaufort is about the size of Geneva, so about 13,000 people. It's the fastest, it was when I was there, the fastest growing area in South Carolina. So we were looking at double-digit population growth and wrestling with things like property values, high cost of property, affordable housing, those types of things. I was doing some planning, community development work there as the assistant city manager. I was recruited to Atlanta by a previous city manager friend of mine. Sandy Springs was a chartered city. Sandy Springs is just north of Atlanta, right around Buckhead, if you're familiar with the Atlanta area. And it was chartered in 2006, so it was a brand new city. And so it was exciting for me to be able to kind of build all the infrastructure around the city. And I'm not talking about streets and highways, I'm talking about laws and codes, zoning, all of that stuff, putting that stuff in place for the first time. The other interesting thing about Sandy Springs was that the city council who was elected ultimately determined that a traditional bureaucratic form of government wasn't what they were looking for, so they outsourced all of their city operations except police and fire to a single company, and I worked for that company. So I had some private sector experience before I came to Geneva. Ultimately, my wife's family is from Geneva, and so as our family started to grow, we wanted to be close to her family. She'd done her best watching us move farther and farther and farther south, away from her family. The southern accent wasn't picking up with her, she wasn't getting it, so we decided to look for something up north, and Geneva opened up. Geneva is, as I noted, about 13,000 people. It's a city with about a $17 million general fund budget. They also handle water and wastewater for about another $10 million. And I was hired as Geneva's 6th city manager, and it was my first job as a city manager. So in Geneva, I oversee 9 department heads and manage all the day-to-day operations there.
And so how does a city, hypothetically Saratoga Springs, if we were to switch to this system, how do you go about finding a city manager? How do you write a job description? How does that hiring process work?
Yeah, the great news is you don't have to start from scratch. It's been done, and it's been done very successfully in a lot of communities that have similar budgets to Saratoga Springs, that have similar layouts and populations. And so the first place I would stop if I were developing a job description would be one of the trade groups. New York State has a City Managers Association. A lot of us belong to that, as well as there's an International City Managers Association. But before you even go there, I think the most critical first step is getting a clear community vision for what you're looking for in a city manager, because at the end of the day, the job description is something that New York State needs to check a box for civil service. What you're really looking for is the perfect fit, the right match for someone who can support you in your efforts to grow and to be a great city. And
how does the public and the city council sort of get involved in sort of coming up with that format?
So in my case, what happened was they decided to do an internally organized search, which is to say they didn't go to a firm. There are plenty of firms, executive search firms out there, who structure these recruitments for you. What City Council did in Geneva was establish a couple of resident panels, a couple of local stakeholder panels, and ask those folks, what is it that you're looking for in a city manager? And those residents put together their top priorities for who they wanted to see come to Geneva and manage. And once the City Council was able to synthesize that, put that inside of a good framework, they asked those folks to stay on. And they became part of the interview process. So the city cast a wide net. I found out about it all the way down in Atlanta. So they cast a wide net using organizations like the International City Managers Association and other recruitment tools to draw in prospective applicants. And thankfully, I want to say they received about 50 applications. They used those citizen groups, those citizen panels, to score the applications and come up with 10 that they were interested in, 10 finalists. The 10 finalists then interviewed with the citizen panels. That was step one. We did phone interviews with the citizen panels, and the citizen panels scored the phone interviews, provided those to City Council. They were aggregated by our HR folks, and City Council got a look at what the residents saw as their top 3 candidates. And thankfully I was among those and was able to travel to Geneva for in-person interviews. Once I was in Geneva, I met with the full staff team, so I met with all of the managers, as did all of the finalists, and toured all the city facilities, toured the entire community. It was a full day event, and then met with the City Council first thing in the morning and last thing at night. And so I got a really full, indoctrination of what was happening in Geneva, both from a resident perspective, from an action level staff perspective, and then from the City Council perspective.
It sounds like a pretty competitive process.
It really is. And I was speaking earlier to a reporter, and I was saying, what an attractive opportunity Saratoga Springs is anyway. My anticipation is that if you did decide to go this route, when you cast your net, you're gonna see a lot of folks who've got a strong interest in a community like this.
And one of the things that's sort of exciting, and I guess maybe it's even new to me, was that the significant role of the public and the community in sort of helping influence the process.
Yeah, first of all, your work to date, the Commission's work to date here in analyzing the question and getting the information out to the voters, I think is step 1A, right? The hope is that the residents will feel validated, will recognize that local leadership here's what they're saying about this form of government, and that they'll stay engaged all the way through that process, all the way through that hiring process. It was, and it continues to be. I mean, one of the things that folks raise questions about with city managers in particular is there's a question of accountability, right? So elected officials are accountable every 4 years or every however many years to the electorate. and some people feel city managers are isolated from that. And I can tell you that even at Geneva scale, at Sandy Springs scale, 100,000 people, I'm held accountable in the grocery store every day. I'm held accountable on the softball field or the t-ball field, and I love it. We have a wide open door in City Hall. People call me directly. They speak to my department heads directly, and we deal in the produce section as well. That's where things get done.